Pag-angat ng buhay nasa iyong mga kamay. Gustong makibahagi, gustong makiisa sa pag-unlad ng ating bansa. Huwag nang mabahala, PhilSys ang kasangga mo. Tunay na serbisyo ay maaasahan. Sama-samang ulat sa paraang makabago. Taas no kahit kanino magpakilala. Heto na ang PhilSys, ID natin to. Ang ID ng bawat Pilipino. Handog sa atin ng PhilSys, ID natin to. Sa ID natin, tuloy ang progreso. Maihahatid ang tulong sa mga nangangailangan. Mabisa, mabilis at ligtas sa korupsyon. Sisiguraduhin walang maiiwan sa mga benepisyo sa lahat ng mga Pilipino. Huwag nang mabahala, PhilSys ang kasangga mo. Tunay na serbisyo ay maaasahan. Sama-samang uunlad sa paraang makabago. Taas no kahit kanino magpakilala. Heto na ang PhilSys, ID natin to. Ang ID ng bawat Pilipino. Handog sa atin ng PhilSys, ID natin to. Sa ID natin, tuloy ang progreso. Makabagong Pilipinas ay nandito na. Makilahok sa pag-unlad at magpakilala. ID natin to. Tara na makiisa sa ating pagsulong. Tayo ay sama-sama. Tayo ay sama-sama. Heto na ang PhilSys, ID natin to. Ang ID ng bawat Pilipino. Handog sa atin ng PhilSys, ID natin to. Sa ID natin tuloy ang progreso. Kahit tagal mo nang hinihintay, pag-angat ng buhay nasa iyong mga kamay. Gustong makibahagi, gustong makiisa sa pag-unlad ng ating bansa. Huwag nang mabahala, PhilSys ang kasangga mo. Tunay na serbisyo ay maaasahan. Sama-samang ulat sa paraang makabago. Taas no kahit kanino magpakilala. Heto na ang PhilSys, ID natin to. Ang ID ng bawat Pilipino. Handog sa atin ng PhilSys, ID natin to. Sa ID natin, tuloy ang progreso. Maihahatid ang tulong sa mga nangangailangan. Mabisa, mabilis at ligtas sa korupsyon. Sisiguraduhin walang maiiwan sa mga benepisyo sa lahat ng mga Pilipino. Huwag nang mabahala, PhilSys ang kasangga mo. Tunay na serbisyo ay maaasahan. Sama-samang
Welcome to the PhilSys press conference. With us today are Acting Secretary Karl Kendrick T. Chua of NEDA, USEC Denis S. Mapa of PSA, USEC Denis Villorente from DICT, and ASEC Rosalinda P. Bautista from the PSA. The moderator for today's press conference is Director Nerissa T. Esguerra of the National Economic and Development Authority.
Okay, good morning to all panelists and media partners. Before we start the press conference, we invite everyone to watch the overview of the step-by-step PhilSys registration process.
Magandang balita! Magsisimula na sa October 12 ang unang hakbang ng Philippine Identification System of PhilSys Registration sa mga piling lugar. Mayroong tatlong hakbang ang PhilSys Registration. Step 1. Pagkolekta ng demographic information at appointment setting. Step 2. Validation and biometric capture. Step 3. Issuance ng PhilSys number o PSN at PhilID. Prioridad ng Philippine Statistics Authority ang kaligtasan ng registrants at registration staff. Kaya naman, ang PhilSys registration ngayong taon ay magsisimula sa 664 cities and municipalities in 32 provinces na itinuturing COVID-19 low-risk areas. Sa ganitong paraan, mas mapapangalagaan ang kapakanan ng registrants at registration staff habang mahigpit na pinatutupad ang health at safety standards sa pagrerehistro. Pangunahin ring irerehistro ang low-income household heads upang mapadali para sa kanila ang pagbukas ng bank o e-money accounts. Dahil dito, mas mabilis na nilang matatanggap ang kanilang mga ayuda mula sa pamahalaan gamit ng digital channels. Sisiguraduhin din ng PhilSys na maging mas maayos ang targeting ng mga benepisyaryo ng social welfare programs ng gobyerno. Sa paunang 32 provinces na may 57.6 million na kabuoang populasyon, tinatayang nasa 15% o 9 million ang target registrants para sa unang hakbang ng PhilSys registration ngayong taon. Ano ba ang mangyayari sa unang hakbang ng PhilSys registration? Tara at alamin natin. Una, mayroong bibisita na PSA enumerator sa inyong tahanan para sa unang hakbang ng PhilSys registration. Ang ating mga PSA enumerator ay may suot na valid PSA ID at magpapakilala na sila ay bahagi ng PhilSys registration. Mahigpit na ipatutupad ang pagsusuot ng face mask at face shield. Sisiguraduhin din na mapapanatili ang 1 meter social distancing habang kausap ang PSA enumerator. Pangalawa, hihingiin ng PSA enumerator ang inyong consent o permiso upang kolektahin ang inyong demographic information. Pangatlo, kukuhaan kayo ng front-facing photograph ng PSA enumerator. Ito ang gagamiting reference para sa on-site registration at upang masiguro na kayo ang may-ari ng impormasyon. Paalala na hindi ito ang lalabas na litrato sa inyong ID. Pang-apat, gamit ang isang tablet, kokolektahin ng PSA enumerator ang mga sumusunod na impormasyon. Ang inyong pangalan, kasarian, araw at lugar ng kapanganakan, blood type, address, kung kayo ba ay Filipino o resident alien, at mga impormasyon na opsyonal ninyong ibigay. Phone number at email address. Pang-lima, i-check kung tama ang impormasyon na na-input ng PSA enumerator. Pang-anim, tatanungin ng PSA kung mayroon kang isa sa mga sumusunod na dokumento para dalhin sa pangalawang hakbang ng PhilSys registration. Philippine Statistics Authority issued Certificate of Live Birth at isang government-issued identification document na naglalaman ng buong pangalan, front-facing photograph, at pirma o thumb mark. Philippine Passport na inisyu ng Department of Foreign Affairs. Unified Multipurpose Identification Card na inisyu ng Government Service Insurance System o Social Security System. Valid Student's License Permit o Non-Professional or Professional Driver's License mula sa Land Transportation Office. Paalala lamang na ihanda ang isa sa mga dokumentong nakasaad upang dalhin sa pangalawang hakbang ng PhilSys registration. Pang-pito, ipaalam sa PSA enumerator ang inyong libreng araw at oras para sa pangalawang hakbang ng PhilSys registration. Pagkatapos kumpirmahin ang schedule, mayroong appointment slip na ibibigay ang PSA enumerator. Ingatan at dalhin ang appointment slip kasama ang inyong documentary requirements sa araw ng inyong appointment. Mahalaga ang appointment system na ito para makasiguro na hindi sabay-sabay ang pagdagsa ng registrants sa registration center para na rin sa kaligtasan ng bawat isa. Ano naman ang dapat asahan at ihanda para sa pangalawang hakbang ng PhilSys registration? Una, sa araw ng inyong appointment, pumunta sa designated registration center sa inyong lugar, dala ang inyong dokumento at appointment slip. Aming pinaalala na mahigpit na pinatutupad ang pagsusuot ng face mask at face shield sa registration center. Ugaliin din magdala ng alkohol at sariling ballpen kung sakaling may kailangang isulat. Pagdating sa registration center ay panatilihin ang 1 meter social distancing. Pangalawa, ipakita sa screener ang inyong dokumento at appointment slip. Dito ay check ng screener ang inyong appointment at dalang supporting documents. Pangatlo, pagkatapos i-check ay bibigyan ng screener ang registrant ng queuing number. Hintayin kapag may libre ng encoder na pwedeng lapitan. Pang-apat, lumapit sa encoder at ibigay ang inyong appointment slip. Gamit ang QR code o reference number sa inyong slip ay may-retrieve ng encoder ang inyong demographic information mula sa unang hakbang ng PhilSys registration. Pang-lima, iko-cross-check ng encoder ang inyong demographic information sa supporting document na inyong dala. Pang-anim, i-check rin kung tama ang pre-encoded information mula sa unang hakbang ng PhilSys registration. Pang-pito, kung kumpirmadong tama ang nakuhang impormasyon, kukunin na ng encoder ang inyong biometric information tulad ng inyong fingerprint, iris scan, at litrato. Sisiguraduhin ng PSA na ang mga equipment na gagamitin ay malinis. Paalala lamang din po na mag-alkohol pagkatapos humawak sa fingerprint scanner. Pang-walo, pagkatapos i-scan ng encoder ang inyong supporting documents, kukunin ang kopya ng transaction slip. Siguraduhin na ito ay pirmado ng encoder. Ito ang dalawa sa tatlong hakbang ng pagrerehistro sa PhilSys. Ang huling hakbang ay ang pag-issue ng PhilSys number at PhilID. Antabayan ang mga anunsyo tungkol sa PhilSys sa PhilSys Facebook page o magtanong sa inyong munisipyo o barangay para sa karagdagang impormasyon. Makilahok sa pag-unlad at magpakilala. ID natin to, tara na at makiisa. Ito ang PhilSys, ang ID ng bawat Pilipino.
Okay, so nakita niyo po ang proseso ng pagrehistro. So we now go to the question and answer portion of the press conference. We have with the Secretary Karl Kendrick Chua, Undersecretary Denis Mapa, and ASEC Rosalinda P. Bautista of PSA, and also DICT USEC Denis Villorente, who's also seconded to, who's assigned to the PSA. So before stating your, we'll start reading the questions sent in advance. I grouped the questions in 4 areas. One is on implementation timelines and status. Second is on the cost or budget. The third is on technical and technological matters. And fourth is on the use or benefit of PhilSys. If there are other categories, we'll just call on you later. So first, the first set of questions is on timelines and implementation status. From Warren de Guzman of ABS-CBN News Channel, may we have an updated timeline for PhilSys registration and release of IDs? And also from Naomi Tiburcio of PTV4, when will the pre-registration start for NCR and the rest of the provinces with high COVID active cases? And then from Warren de Guzman, also, what health measures will be used to ensure PhilSys registration will be safe for both citizens and PSA personnel? And then lastly, from Kai Ordinario of Business Mirror, can the government still meet its target of registering 5 million household heads this year? And if it can, how? And if it cannot, what will be its plan B? So first on the, a complete explanation of the implementation status and timelines. May we have your answer, please? Yusek Denis?
Thank you very much. First, I'd like to start with the question of Warren de Guzman about the updated timeline for the PhilSys registration and the release of the ID. So for the October to December operations, as explained also in the video, the registration step 1, or the collection of the demographic information, will start this Monday, October 12, in 664 cities and municipalities in 32 provinces. Now, what will happen after that is that we will have a registration step 2, or the validation and biometric capture, the fingerprints, the iris scan, and the photograph. This will start at the end of November until December 30. And finally, the registration step 3, or the issuance of the PhilSys number, or the PSN, and the PhilID will be starting 2021 onward. So after that, the release of the ID will follow through. So those are the steps and the timeline for the October to December operations related to the registrations of the registrants in selected provinces for the PhilSys. There is a follow-up question related also to the registration. How about the National Capital Region and the rest of the provinces with high COVID cases? The target of the government remains, which is to complete the registration and the issuances of the PhilSys numbers and the ID to all Filipinos at the end of June 2022. Our target is about 92 million, despite the challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. Our priority really is to ensure the safety of the registrant and our registration officers by implementing the PhilSys registration protocol designed specifically to address the health and safety standards. Now, after the registration of the low-income household heads, the Philippine Statistics Authority will make the registration available to the public in 2021 through the help of our LGUs, partners, agency, and other stakeholders. For the third question, again, from Warren, what are the health measures that will be used to ensure that the PhilSys registration will be safe for both citizens and the PSA personnel? As mentioned, the Philippine Statistics Authority has strengthened its registration protocol in ensuring that we have the strict adherence to the health protocols and safety standards enforced by the Department of Health and the Interagency Task Force on Emerging Infectious Diseases. That is why the registration is done in 3 steps, simply to reduce exposure while following the health protocols. Now, in coordination with the local government units, the Philippine Statistics Authority has identified 32 areas, as I mentioned, with low risk of COVID-19 transmission as our first batch for this step 1 of the registration process. The following will be strictly observed, as well as during our registration process: physical distancing, wearing of face masks and face shield, availability of alcohol, sanitation of the area, registration area, and cleaning of our equipment, our registration machines after each use. The PhilSys registration team will also be regularly checked for any COVID-19 related symptoms, which will be reported immediately to their supervisors for immediate action. Related to the registration numbers, can the government meet its target of registering 5 million households this year? If it can, how, and if it cannot, what would be the plan B? Now, as mentioned, for this operation from October to December, the Philippine Statistics Authority is aiming to get at least 9 million Filipinos to complete the registration step 1, capturing of the demographic information and the appointment system for the registration step 2. Now, we will be targeting as many of this 9 million to complete the registration step 2, which is the capture of the biometric information at the registration center and the back-end validation for the documents that they submitted. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yusek Denis. I think malinaw na po yon yung proseso. Now for the next set of questions on the budget or the cost. From Ted Cordero of GMA News, how much will be the total investment for the PhilSys, including the printing of IDs, the creation of a database, and the mobilization of teams who will retrieve information from applicants? A related question also is from Warren de Guzman of ABS-CBN News Channel. May we have an updated evaluation of the cost involved in the PhilSys launch? Were there additional costs incurred? And is there a danger of going over budget? Yusek Denis?
Thank you very much. Okay, we submitted the budget for the PhilSys, the overall budget for the PhilSys at the NEDA ICC last May 2020, and the budget is about 27.8 billion. That is the entire budget for the PhilSys. Now, as mentioned, there are of course calibration that were incorporated in the registration operation, particularly the registration step 1. We allocated budget for the hiring of enumerators and procurement of tablets for us to conduct house-to-house collection of the demographic data and the scheduling of the appointment, which is part of the registration step 1. So this is the one that is part of the new innovation for the registration process. But we believe that this redesign of the registration process by adding this registration step 1 is necessary to ensure the safety of both the registrant and our registration officers in the light of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we feel that this will not really have impact on the overall budget of the PhilSys. Back to you.
Thank you, Yusek Denis. Are there any other follow-up questions on budget before we move to technical and technological matters? Just raise your hand or write in the chat box. If there are none, let's move to the question from Warren de Guzman of ABS-CBN News Channel again. Has PSA considered the suggestions of the private sector of having a digital national ID saved in the cloud, which can be accessed by government, banks, institutions, etc., through the permission of the ID owner? Maybe, yeah.
Director, may I request Undersecretary Denis Villorente to answer this question?
Yes, Yusek, the other Yusek Denis, please.
Thank you, Director Yulisa. So we intend for PhilSys to harness the strengths of cloud technology. And so we have adopted a hybrid cloud solution for our systems integrator to leverage the inherent efficiency, availability, and scalability of cloud, while maintaining control and security safeguards by storing data that's collected under PhilSys in government data centers. We intend to deliver the best and most secure PhilSys to Filipinos, and we believe that this hybrid cloud solution opens more opportunities for PhilSys to link with other government agencies, the private sector, including banks and other financial institutions, and so on. So this is fully in line with the government's cloud first policy. And through this, we will continue to make PhilSys or keep PhilSys abreast of technological advancements. It should be noted as well that the authentication services of PhilSys will be provided both online as well as offline. So there will be an online authentication service to provide identity services to citizens and relying parties. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Yusek Denis. Let me just read a question from Cerisa Valencia, going back to the implementation status for NCR and other areas of high risk of transmission. What will prompt the PSA to start the pre-registration and process? For example, sorry, I think your question got cut. Cerisa, would you like to unmute yourself? Okay. The question was for NCR and other areas of high risk of transmission, what will prompt the PSA to start the pre-registration and process? Yusek Denis? Mapa?
Actually, what the PSA is planning is that by January 2021, we will cover all areas in the country. So we will go through the process of still the registration step 1 and the actual registration for all areas. So our teams in the different areas, so we have already PhilSys teams coordinating with the local government units in the National Capital Region and other areas that are not covered in these 32 provinces. So right now, while the registration step 1 and registration step 2 will happen in the 32 provinces, the coordination with the local government units and the preparatory activities for the launch to the other areas are actually ongoing. So by January, we will move to the other areas, including the National Capital Region. So January 2021, the registration operation for the PhilSys will now be nationwide.
Okay. Yeah. There was also, before we go to the next set of questions, there's also a question from Abante, Eileen Mencias. Marami po sa mahihirap ang nawalan na ng tirahan at ang iba sa kanila ay walang birth certificates. Paano sila maire-register sa sistema kung wala silang birth certificates? Isa sa requirement ang primary document tulad ng birth certificates. Para makuha ito sa PSA, kailangan magbayad ng mga tao. Paano po ang mga mahihirap na wala ngang makain?
Okay, yung birth certificate ay isa sa mga primary documents na kailangan ng PhilSys registration team. Pero kanina na-mention doon sa ating instruction for the registration step 1, mayroon din tayong mga secondary documents, no? So pwede naman ng iba pang mga documents katulad ng barangay ID, postal ID, at iba pang mga government issued ID. So ito ay tatanggapin ng aming mga registration officers para makapag-rehistro doon sa step 1 ng ating mga mahihirap na kababayan.
Salamat po. Galing naman kay Chino Leico of Manila Bulletin, how much is the government budget to protect the system from hackers and other possible cyber threats?
I will request our Undersecretary Denis Villorente to answer that question. But part of the budget of the PhilSys, because this is part of the budget, is really on the protection of the data, including our cybersecurity. So I don't have the actual amount now, but part of that overall budget that I mentioned to you kanina, yung 27.8, is really for the protection of the data that will be collected by our registration officers. So kasama na po yun lahat.
Yusek Denis?
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry po, kanina po hindi ako makapag-unmute eh. Okay, tungkol naman po sa budget for cybersecurity, hindi po namin masabi ngayon dahil naka-include po siya doon sa total cost or price noong systems integrator po na kinontrata ng PSA. So kasama doon sa bid nila is the cost of providing for cybersecurity. So siguro po we can provide you that information separately, pero sa ngayon po kasi yung overall cost ng systems integrator nasa 2.2 billion pesos ang igagastos ng PSA para po doon sa systems integrator. At parte po nung kanilang iso-supply yung cybersecurity components para ma-secure yung IT infrastructure ng PhilSys.
Please, salamat po, DICT Undersecretary. Sunod ko lang pong basahin yung kay Ted Cordero of GMA News. Will the government direct banks to require only a national ID for opening of accounts purposes, since many banks are asking for 2 or more IDs, which is among the hindrances why many are still unbanked?
Okay, thank you very much for that question, Ted. Now, although we differ to the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas on bank regulatory specifics, I understand the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas Governor Ben Diokno said in a statement that the PhilSys will satisfy the KYC or the Know Your Customer requirements of banks in opening bank accounts. And this will surely ease the access of our target registrant who are, as mentioned for the October to December 2020 operations, are the low-income household heads to our basic banking services. This will not only enable the safe and more efficient distribution of aid, it will also protect them from predatory informal lending practices. Thank you.
Okay, this is from Karina Ramos, Polinga. How about those individuals with double entries in their birth records? Can they still participate in the PhilSys National ID Registration Program? Yung may double entries daw po sa kanilang birth records.
Yes, they will. They will be registered. Ang mangyayari naman kasi, ang ating authentication service ay doon sa mga biometrics, no? So isa doon ang aming tatanggapin, and dahil nga ito ay birth certificate ay ma-verify natin sa aming system.
Okay. Galing kay Josefina Cortez ng Samal, Bataan. Ang registration process up to December 2020 po ba ang mga low-income household heads ay gagawin ng 7 days a week at 9 hours a day ng mga registration officers?
Yes, itong operation natin sa October to December, 9 hours per day yung ating pagrehistro dahil kailangan natin na marami ang ating ma-register, particularly doon sa step 1. Ano? Now, pagdating doon sa step 2, sa step 1 registration process, we have 9 hours operation, 6 days a week. And pagdating naman natin doon sa registration step 2, kasi kailangan pumunta na talaga sa registration centers natin na nandoon sa mga local government units like municipal city hall or barangay hall. Ito po ay bubuksan at i-operate ng PSA ng 7 days a week at 9 hours din po per day ang ating operations.
Galing pa rin po kay Josefina Cortez, again from Samal, Bataan. Ang qualified introducer po ay ang barangay captains at tribal leaders. Pwede po ba silang introducers kung wala silang issued PhilSys ID?
Ang una, isa sa mga target natin na i-register una ay yung mga barangay officials natin na nandoon sa lugar kung saan natin gagawin yung ating registration step 1 at registration step 2. So, uunahin natin din. Kasama rin natin i-register yung ating mga barangay officials para sila yung mag-introduce. So, yung kanilang mga demographic and biometric information ay nasa system na po ng PhilSys.
Salamat po kay Mayor Francisco Mamba ng LGU Tuaw. What are the criteria of determining a low-income household head?
Thank you very much for that question. Itong datos na ginagamit namin sa pag-identify ng mga areas, ng mga households na uunahin namin dito sa October to December operation ay galing sa listahanan ng DSWD. Again, ito po ay una lamang na mga households na pupuntahan ng PSA registration officers mula October to December. Pero itong ating pagparehistro sa PhilSys system ay lahatan na po. So by 2021, mas marami na ang mapaparehistro, you are low income or hindi ka low income household, kasama na po ito sa PhilSys registration. So ang aming inuuna lang para lang dito sa October to December operation ay yung mga nasa low income household at yung listahan nito ay galing sa DSWD listahanan 3. Thank you.
Okay, galing po kay Decker Cristobal of Dinalupihan, is there a plan of integrating this ID with all government IDs such as SSS, PhilHealth, GSIS, UMID, LTO driver's license, etc.?
Director, I think kanina na-explain yata yan ni Yusik Denis Villorente, so I'll ask him to expound on that, Yusik Denis.
Salamat, Yusek Mapa. Yung plano po for government agencies na nag-i-issue ng sarili na ng ID, so meron po silang sariling listahan ng mga members nila or beneficiaries. So ang gagawin po, merong number na manggagaling sa PhilSys na ilalagay naman doon sa databases nila. So ang tawag po namin doon, seeding. So yung number po na yon unique doon sa citizen na miyembro naman nila. So magagamit ngayon nila yon para linisin yung databases naman nila ng mga members nila. Kasi nga po yung number na yon unique to a citizen, and then that number is based on pag-identify namin na yung tao na yon hindi double registrant, kasi alam namin based on his biometrics na isang beses lang siya nagrehistro sa sistema. So with that po, once yung number na yon naibigay na sa SSS or sa GSIS or sa LTO for driver's licenses naman, or sa PhilHealth for example, pwede ngayon nilang malinis yung kanilang sariling database of members. So, yun po yung plano.
Okay. Maraming salamat po, Yusek Denis. Galing po kay Naomi Tiburcio of PTV4. Tama po bang walang babayaran yung kukuha ng ID? I think malinaw po yun. Meron pa po bang questions from our reporters, members of the media? Yes, Ben De Vera from Inquirer. Please unmute, Ben.
Hello po, magandang umaga.
There.
Sir, in this mapa, sir, can you provide us with a breakdown of the budget, the 27.8 billion budget? This started, if I'm correct, sir, this would cover since PhilSys was approved in 2018 until 2022 po ba siya, or just for this year? And sir, can you also provide us how much would be the budget for this year and for next year, the specific budgets to roll
Okay, yung budget, no, yung pagparehistro kasi ng lahat, no, ng mga Pilipinos, continuing process 'yan. So, yun ang tiningnan noong budget kanina na sinabi ko na 27.8 billion. Pero yung naibigay pa lang sa PSA Noong 2018, tama ka, Ben, na nagsimula tayo dito sa 2018. So nabigyan kami ng 2 billion budget. Tapos itong 2019 ay nabigyan kami ng 2.1 billion budget. At itong 2020 ay 3 billion budget. So ang naibigay sa amin lahat ngayon ay nasa 7.1 billion. At sa 2021, dahil malaki nga yung aming target na i-rehistro, ay binigyan kami ng 4.1 billion budget. No? So sa ngayon, ito ay including 2021, mga nasa 11.2 billion ang kabuuan na maibibigay sa PSA.
Menes Mapa, sir, ano po yung mga paggagamitan ng 2021 budget, yung 4.1 billion for next year?
Okay. Ang isa kasing malaking gastos sa ating PhilSys operation, of course, sabi ko kanina sa aking presentation, yung mga key components natin ay na-procure na ng PSA, no? Yung registration kits, yung automated biometric identification system, saka yung systems integrator. Pero ang isa sa pinakamalaking gastos sa lahat ng mga national ID talaga ay yung registration process, no? Ito ay yung mga registration officers namin na pupunta sa mga bayan-bayan, mga barangay para mag-collect ng information. Pagkatapos, ang isang malaking component din ay yung pag-produce ng ID mismo. No? So ito ang dalawang major items in the budget for 2021.
Sir, last question na po. Perhaps you can comment or NEDA Secretary Karl Chua po. Yun nga po, since right now there's seems to be parang a little problem with the budget in case it gets delayed, what will be the impact on the rollout of the PhilSys next year, given that kailangan sir na 4.1 billion and yung mismo pag-rollout would be dependent pala on the next year's budget. Thank you, sirs.
May I request our secretary to answer that last question?
Well, let me begin by saying that we have sufficient budget to begin the registration this year. And we are waiting for additional budget, which we have submitted, so that we can begin the preparation right now to continue the registration next year. At the same time, we have to basically balance our targets with the safety protocols. So the more that the virus is contained and we can actually lower the quarantine, then the faster that we can move. But for the safety of the registrants and those who will do the registration, then we have to also be mindful of that. But the budget is sufficient to get us started and continue until early next year.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Yun na po yung last question para dito sa press conference. Sec Karl, would you like to have the final words before we close close this press conference?
Well, thank you very much for all of you who attended the press conference. So as I said earlier, we are very committed to delivering the national ID. And we have made our preparations. However, when we started the preparation, we did not, and no one anticipated the COVID pandemic and the quarantines that are put in place. So what we did is to be adaptive. We have already announced the start of the registration step 1. We will proceed with caution on step 2 because that involves your biometric capture, which of course you will put your eyes and your fingerprints on the machine. So we will be very careful. We have your safety in mind, but we will proceed as efficiently as possible to get as many of you registered. So thank you very much for all the cooperation. We will continue to work with all the government agencies, the private sector, civil society, the LGUs, and all the families who will be registering. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary Karl, Undersecretary Denis Mapa, and Undersecretary Denis Villorente. That concludes the online kickoff event for PhilSys partners on behalf of NEDA, PSA, and DICT, we would like to thank all of our friends from the media, colleagues from the government, and our honorable guests for joining us today. Maraming salamat po at mag-ingat po tayong lahat.